Until now, our focus has been more on the good planning of a project before starting to actually implement it. That is indeed extremely important, but in this section we focus more on managing the whole, in other words, integration management during the actual implementation of the project. So through integration management over the course of the project, which starts right at the start of the project and continues all the way through the project until the end of the project. Through this, one tries to make sure that in all situations we get all the benefits and results out of the project that we have been looking to get, and that the project serves the attainment of the business's goals. And overall, we aim to make sure that our project remains implementable until the end. Here, essential tools are, of course, the project plan and the schedules related to it, breakdown of the project, all this that we have been discussing until now. That is, good planning creates a foundation for integration management during the course of the project. But in addition to that, we always have to be prepared for changes. One will always come across them in projects. Situations change, conditions change, maybe even the purpose of the product of the project may change during a long project. How do we think of the changes that it brings along, and how do we make use of the new situations as effectively as possible? In addition to this, we always have to be up to date as to how the project is really progressing, what is going on there. And if it does not progress according to the schedule, costs, or there are some other problems regarding the project, we should be able to react to them in time. We also have to report on the progress, to tell about it to our important stakeholders as to what is going on, so that they stay up to date and can on their own part assist in the completion of the project. If we take Fennovoima's Hanhikivi nuclear power plant project as an example, even there have been all sorts of changes, for example, regarding the schedule, even though the actual construction hasn't started yet. And this has been managed, for example, through change management and reporting processes. And finally, one important part of project management is assessing the success of the project. It's easy to think that, hey, let's do that at the end of the project, but then it's far too late. And one should be able to do that success assessment even during the project, and through that to make necessary changes in the project. But let's go next to this change management, which is easily seen as a negative thing. The traditional view of project management has been that, oh my God, there's a change, it's some kind of threat. There are changes, and they are caused by problems, but this doesn't necessarily have to be the case. In change management, we can also start from such positive thoughts as that in the early stages of the project, the plans are to some extent based on wrong or too limited information, and we have made in the beginning such decisions which were not necessarily optimal in terms of the project success. And now, during the project implementation, we have the opportunity to fix those mistakes and to make use of new opportunities. Maybe we have also found new, better implementation methods, or even seen what the ultimate use of the product will be, and we make, for example, small changes to the scope of the project. Usually, of course, we have to be careful about those changes, since, as we saw earlier, that changes made at a late stage are usually expensive, and they also disturb the implementation of the project in such a way that the schedule may fail, and overall an individual change may cause mistakes in many places. So due to that, we must be very careful when analyzing the effects of the change. But in principle, we should always be vigilant and concentrate on whether there are also opportunities to develop this project and to make it better. And detecting needs for change in advance is an important part of having a successful project. A good example of this is, for example, the Tampere tramway project, where much has been actually invested into serving opportunities as well. And indeed, once the changes have been recognized and the effects have been analyzed, then you accept or reject the changes if we see that, for example, the individual change is good enough and would improve the project. And then if it has some kind of knock-on effects and is negative as a whole in terms of the implementation of the project, it will be then rejected. And when it comes to accepting or rejecting the change, it's good to have very clear practices within the project as to through what kinds of procedures, who accepts the change, who has the mandate to accept and what. And preferably so that changes are accepted continuously all the time. Not so that we make a lot of changes and then we accept them at the end of the project. There's been a lot of discussion of these plus-minus lists where you collect those changes and then at the end of the project you start arguing about whether these were justified, whether part of the original project plan or are they additional tasks that you have to pay for example to the supplier. And if these are done at the end of the project, that will easily lead into quarrels. But when you do them all the time during the project, you can agree on the spot what to do. The purpose of reporting on and monitoring a project is to make sure that the project progresses according to the plan. Or at least that we know how the project is progressing, and then we can intervene with any possible deviations. And reporting is important because then we can inform all of our important stakeholders or those actors who can influence to help the project or to whom the success of the project is important. So we can inform them about how we are progressing. This is often something that is forgotten in project management. So it's fairly easy for us to keep our important stakeholders aware, for example, on a monthly or weekly basis or whatever the implementation schedule of the project is, of what is happening in the project. This is also important in the sense that at the same time that we are reporting to them on what we are doing, quite often we also expect something from them, from the stakeholders. At the same time, with the monthly reporting, we can also tell them that next month this and that will happen and we expect, for example, the customer to accept these kinds of things, or that, for example, the space where we are going to install the system must be ready next month when the installation work begins. And we can examine this progress from the perspective of the progress of the product. That is, does it progress on schedule? Is the product being made according to the schedule that was originally planned? And on the other hand, how are the expenses accumulating? So what kind of work has been done with the project? How much expenses have accumulated? Why possibly, for example, the expenses have been more or less than expected? Then, what are some features of a generally effective project control system? As we saw earlier, it is always based on careful project planning. That is a good estimation of time, amount of work and expenses. After we have this good planning, we can start controlling the project on the basis of that. So it's clear communication about what tasks are required of the various actors in order to reach the outcome of the project, what kinds of responsibilities there are. Here, for example, monthly reporting on what is expected from the different actors during the following month is a good tool. Disciplined budgeting, expense approval are important. This kind of a basic thing in financial management must be in order in the project. Otherwise, it is very difficult for us to keep track how the financial side is doing in big projects. No individual person can manage it in their own head. And then the monitoring of the progress of the product. So we are talking about the degree of completeness. If we have planned that, for example, the detached house will have a roof by the end of November, and at the end of November we see that we are only laying the foundation, so then your alarm bells should ring that the product is not progressing, it is not going to be completed according to the schedule. Then there is the periodic comparison of what has been done and what has been planned, and then the planning of necessary or repairing measures. So now this good and effective control system gives us data as to whether we are progressing according to the schedule and the budget and whether some repairing measures are required. When it comes to reporting to different target groups, the reports should be modified and made according to the stakeholder. So if there is a customer, the customer wants specific data and data that is on a specific level. So we must report it in a form that is easy to understand and to use for the customer. The steering group of the project, the line organization, the project organization, other shareholders and stakeholders, they all have different information requirements and different capacities to understand the progress of the project. According to that, you modify the reporting and the level of reporting and also the form of reporting. For a long time, there has been a trend towards clarifying reports and supporting interpretation through visualization that is as understandable as possible. So the key information has to be clearly visible in the reports. Next, we have several different kinds of reports that illustrate what kinds of reports there are and can be used for monitoring the progress of a project. The basic message here is that reporting has to be done according to the information requirements of the stakeholder, and it is often the case that very simple reporting may be sufficient. For example, when reporting to the steering group of a company or to the CEO, they do not want to know anything else about the project except whether it is progressing according to the plan and the schedule normally. So it can be something like traffic lights or a list where the projects with problems have been marked in red, and then you can deal with them. When it comes to those which are green and are progressing nicely, it is not the CEO's task to start steering them in detail. One important project control method is also calculating the earned value, where we take into account both the progress of the product of the project as well as how many expenses have been incurred. And you can see it there as one report, that is the S-curve, for example, the earned value and the trend report in the picture.